Hey guys, it's KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. So in the wake of the recent Hollywood scandals involving this guy and all of the abuse he's been perpetrating upon victims for decades at this point, I want to go beyond this story because it's being covered everywhere right now, and I want to look at some other aspects of this satanic Hollywood system. These creepers have been creeping for a really long time in Hollywood. And of course, this is an industry that draws all kinds of people to it. There are people who are truly trying to fulfill their dreams, innocent people. And then there are those that are fully willing to give everything they've got just to get a part in a film or a commercial. Just to get some form of fame, they're willing to completely sell themselves out. So let's begin by taking a look at some of those kinds of people that are drawn to this wicked system. Norma Jean Mortensen, better known as Marilyn Monroe, was a blonde bombshell. Most of us know her name. The actress and singer exploded as a pinup girl and a sex symbol for the entire world. Many people believe she was the first beta sex kitten. Before she sang Happy Birthday to President Kennedy, Monroe, at the tender age of 20, landed a modeling contract with Blue Book Modeling Agency. From modeling, Monroe moved on to acting, but Monroe didn't break through right away, and she posed in nude for photographer Tom Kelly in 1949 for just $50. With the eyes of directors and producers upon her, it was reported that Monroe used to, quote, hang out with men in power in the entertainment industry for $500 a day. In some of the Monroe biographies written, numerous claims have been made that Monroe admitted to going on dates with these men for that amount of money in order to get a good meal or extra money to pay the rent, also to get parts in Hollywood films. Brad Pitt, of course, now is an A-list actor, and he comes from Missouri. And back in the day, he had dreams of being a big movie star. Pitt arrived in Hollywood with just $100 in his pocket and hoping to break into the movie business. Of course, he had good looks and a suave attitude, but his first big break didn't come on a big Hollywood set. It came when he arrived late for an interview with Tom Racina, a gay soap star. Racina didn't have a role for him, but instead had a job as his houseboy. So Pitt moved into Racina's home and ran errands, cleaned the pool, walked the dog, and reportedly fulfilled, quote, other needs for Racina in exchange for room and board. Prior to the early 1980s and catching a break, this was Pitt's first foray into Hollywood. Legendary actor Al Pacino hardly brings about thoughts of prostitution. The leading man has become a household name for his explosive characters who jump off the screen. His role as Michael Corleone in the Godfather trilogy and Tony Montana in Scarface has cemented this actor's amazing career. But prior to this Oscar winner getting gigs in Hollywood, he had to work the streets to survive. During early times in his career, Pacino was homeless and struggling to get meals. Pacino lived in Sicily, Italy after he dropped out of school. He told the New York Post, "At 20, I lived in Sicily by selling the only asset I had, my body. An older woman traded food and housing in return for sex." By the time Pacino made it back to the United States, it took some effort to finally get his career going, and when he did, he became one of the biggest actors in Hollywood. Actress Denise Richards is known as a sexual temptress who graced the movie and small screens with explosive roles in the 1990s. She was as hot as any leading lady around. She even rose to the status of a Bond girl for one of her most epic roles. She also ended up marrying Charlie Sheen. Interestingly, before Richards ever actually appeared on camera, she worked for Heidi Fleiss, who's known in Hollywood as a very high-end madam, and she worked for her highly secretive escort service. Richards was a high-end escort who was able to capitalize on her relationships with clients, so it's no coincidence that Charlie Sheen was one of Heidi Fleiss's best customers. Not long ago, Russell Brand found a very successful career as a comedic actor, one that's followed him to mingle with A-list celebrities and eventually even landed him a marriage to Katy Perry. Brand's been very open about his childhood in which he was sexually abused as a child. Brand was also bulimic as a teen. His father wanted to turn him into a man, and at age 16 took him to a Hong Kong brothel where he handpicked out a prostitute for his first official experience. Brand had a rough go of it early in his career, battling demons with his drug addiction and claiming to be a sex addict. When Brand was young, he has stated multiple times that he needed to sell himself in order to afford the drugs. He was an escort for a period of time that allowed him to get by before evolving into the celebrity that we have come to know today. Before Raquel Welch was a sex symbol in the 1960s, she went by the name Raquel Tejeda. The young Welch was a sought-after, beautiful escort who made excellent money. Welch originally moved to Dallas, Texas with her 2 children, and there she started a modeling career with Neiman Marcus and worked as a cocktail waitress on the side. While living in Dallas, high-profile officials were rumored to have paid for Welch's services. Welch was making a very good name for herself as an escort and never had any issues taking her clothes off. In 1979, she donned Playboy's cover. As Welch found success in Hollywood, her days of hooking came to an end. Actor Tony Danza, notable television star of the 1980s hit Who's the Boss, was not the boss early in his career. Danza wanted to make it, and while he was in a boxing gym, he caught the eye of a prostitute. She decided to help Danza out and pass his phone number along to a Hollywood producer that she had been shagging it up with. The connection worked as Danza ultimately ended up being introduced to Merv Griffin. Griffin, highly unusual with some of his behaviors, allegedly paraded Danza around naked, and even nearly naked at times, at various parties and social gatherings. This was not unusual for Merv, as he had regularly scouted for young men. Danza put in his time with Griffin, and it paid off handsomely for him in the end. Actress Joan Collins' acting career was launched back in the 1950s, where she found some success in her native land. But when she moved out to the United States to get into the movies, Hollywood wasn't quite as kind. So Collins struggled early to make her ends meet and to land roles. In doing so, she did what many with a beautiful face and some name recognition do: she became a high-end escort. In doing so, Collins was able to forge relationships with producers and directors all throughout Hollywood as she met them in more intimate settings. So not everybody that I'm talking about here had their hearts set on Hollywood fame. Some of them just became celebrities in their own right. Case in point, Maya Angelou. You probably know her as a poet, but if you've actually read her series of memoirs, then you know that she was at various times also a calypso singer, a Tony-nominated Broadway actress, a paint scraper at a body shop, and San Francisco's first female streetcar driver. When she was fairly young, Angelou worked as a prostitute and a brothel manager, activities which she describes candidly in her 1974 memoir, Gathered Together in My Name. She says, "I wrote about my experiences because I thought too many people tell the young folks I never did anything wrong. I have no skeletons in my closet. In fact, I have no closet. They lie like that, and then young people find themselves in situations and think, well, I must be a pretty bad guy or girl because my mom or dad never did anything wrong. They can't forgive themselves and go on with their lives. So I wrote the book, Gathered Together in My Name." In a 1994 Vanity Fair cover story, television and tabloid star Roseanne Barr confessed to Kevin Sessoms that she had worked as a prostitute in her 20s turning tricks in a mall parking lot. She outlined that and many other details about her mostly depressing early years in the memoir Roseanne, My Lives. From the article she says, "I think prostitution should be legal because the way any society treats its prostitutes reflects directly on how it treats the highest, most powerful women. It has always been here, and women should be able to control it and regulate it. Prostitution is a business." English actor and novelist and one-time new wave singer Rupert Everett was born into a wealthy family, but he spent his younger days escorting his way through college. His first film role, playing a gay character in 1984's Another Country, made him a star, and he came out of the closet at that time. Never shy about expressing his feelings, he revealed his past as an ex-rent boy in 1997, while promoting the career-reviving My Friend's Best Wedding. Bassist and co-founder of legendary punk band The Ramones, the man-born Douglas Colvin spent time as a street hustler in New York, otherwise known as Dee Dee Ramone. Though reluctant to discuss it publicly, other band members have implied that the band's song 53rd and 3rd is loosely inspired by Dee Dee's own experiences in that former Manhattan cruising area. The song is a grim one. None of the Johns are interested, and then one is. The narrator stabs him to prove that he's not a sissy. Christopher Keely's 2007 book, Addict, Out of the Dark and Into the Light, includes an interview with Dee Dee in which he explains what was happening. He says, "And I would work as a mail clerk in the daytime, and that didn't really give me much money because it was a low-paying job. To support an apartment in Manhattan and a drug habit and a heroin habit, I needed more. And at night, I would go to the street corner called 53rd Street and 3rd in Manhattan and hustle, and I'd pick up men I'd go to their homes for $20 and have sex with them so I could buy a couple bags of dope. Bruce Perry's 1991 book Malcolm, The Life of a Man Who Changed Black America directly addresses Malcolm's sexuality, from youthful indiscretions with schoolmates through the period when Malcolm would sneak out of bed at night to visit a gay transvestite named Willie May. The critic and UK LGBT rights activist Peter Tatchell expounded on Malcolm's sexuality and career history in a Guardian editorial called Malcolm X, Gay Black Hero. In New York, two of Malcolm's friends from Michigan remember bumping into him at a YMCA, where Malcolm bragged he earned money servicing, quote, queers. Later, Malcolm worked as a butler to a wealthy Boston bachelor, William Paul Lennon. According to Malcolm's sidekick, Malcolm Jarvis, he was paid to sprinkle Lennon with talcum powder and to bring him to orgasm. Perry suggests that Malcolm's gay encounters may not have been entirely financially motivated. His masculine insecurities and ambivalence towards women fit the archetype of a repressed gay man, and he believed to point to latent homosexuality. So here's another example of Hollywood creepers creeping. This story came out a few years ago. A masseuse actually filed a $2 million lawsuit against John Travolta. So it was during this lawsuit that it was claimed Travolta said Hollywood is run by gay Jewish men who will actually help you get parts if you do sexual favors for them. And it's interesting because even though that case has since been settled, Travolta apparently still requires the services of a company called Man-to-Man Massage whenever he's working on a film. So even though Travolta's been married for years and even has children, it's a very common occurrence in Hollywood. It's so common that what they do is they call it a beard, a gay man who has a woman he's married to for the public eye, and they call the woman the beard. She's the cover-up. So this actually reminds me of a book I became aware of a while back. It's called James Dean, Tomorrow Never Comes. And in the book it's claimed that James Dean was in love with Marlon Brando and they were actually lovers. The problem is alleged that Brando was only in love with Brando, and oftentimes he would make James Dean actually loiter outside of his apartment in desperate hope that his idol would invite him in for sex. When Dean first met Brando in 1949, he told him he was his biggest fan and the two kissed. Dean showed Rogers Brackett, a Manhattan advertising executive who was his on and off again boyfriend, how Brando had actually stubbed out cigarettes on him. So once again, the book is called James Dean, Tomorrow Never Comes. It's also interesting in this book, it's alleged that James Dean had a three-way with Walt Disney, of all people, and also with the director of My Fair Lady, George Cukor. So there's also been a lot of scandal surrounding Bryan Singer. He's a famous Hollywood director. He's directed a lot of the X-Men films. He was the first one to direct an X-Men film. He's an executive producer on a lot of television shows as well. He's been in the industry for a long time. So writer-director Bret Easton Ellis says he actually dated two people who had went through this world of underage parties concerning Bryan Singer. So this is from Ellis. He said he had been one of those guys who had been invited to those parties for 1 or 2 months, and he was a sensitive guy. He wasn't really into the drugs, but he was into the parties and the sex and the attention, and I could easily understand it. I guess he was 17. I don't know how old he was. What was expected of him. He kind of got it, though, and he said, "I'm going to enjoy this now. I understand why I'm here and what my expiration date is and what these people want from me," and then moved on. Ellis also tells a story of having gone to a dinner party in 2007 where a number of guys left early, and when Ellis asked them where they were going, they said they were going to one of Bryan Singer's underage parties in Encino at the M&C estate. Something else to consider when speaking of Bryan Singer is his 1997 movie Apt Pupil, which is based off of a Stephen King story. It starred Brad Renfro and Ian McKellen, who is an open homosexual, by the way. And again, the movie's called Apt Pupil. It's a very controversial movie in and of itself, let alone the fact that a sex abuse scandal popped up during production of the film that involved teenage boy extras. The story itself is about a curious teenage boy, insinuated to be gay in the movie, who is obsessed with Nazi history and discovers the whereabouts of a legendary Nazi who fled Germany and was hiding under a fake name in his hometown. Brad Renfro plays the part of the boy and Ian McKellen plays the old Nazi. The boy does an impressive amount of detective work to figure out the Nazi's identity and tracks him down, and he literally blackmails him with DNA evidence information obtained. The deal was that he would go to authorities and rat out the Nazi if the old man did not agree to teach the boy everything that went on in the concentration camps. It's a macabre and disturbing series of extracurricular activities results. Throughout the story, the theme of blackmail for purposes of power control comes up again and again. It's also worth noting that Brad Renfro ended up spiraling out of control with alcohol and substance abuse issues early in the 2000s, and he died at the age of 25 of a heroin overdose. This also harkens to a darker group in Hollywood which appears to have been singled out specifically by Michael Egan. Michael Egan is one of the first men to bring a suit against Bryan Singer. He alleges Bryan Singer was involved with this group. It does point to some of the more sinister films, ulterior motives, and subliminal messages as well. It's also worth noting that Bryan Singer had originally planned on directing a movie called Prisoners. Now, this movie would have been replete with child abduction, mind control, and Satanism references. The main plot involves a satanic woman who used mind control on abducted children for the purposes of causing the family members of the children to lose hope in God. It's also interesting to note that one of the abductees and victims in that movie was named Alex Jones. So I couldn't end a video on this subject without mentioning Terry Richardson. He's a famous photographer, and he's photographed some of the most famous people in the world. He's shot for some of the biggest high fashion labels and the glossiest magazines. So let's take a brief look at some of the history of Terry Richardson and some of the disturbing things he's been involved in. Terry Richardson's photographs and shock value have become synonymous, but in a 2001-2002 ad campaign with the clothing brand Sisley, things got a little milky. Model Josie Moran posed with a cow's udder and squirted some farm fresh milk into her mouth in a highly suggestive photograph. In 2004, The Observer published an article by Phoebe Eaton, who Richardson's Terry World exhibition, and brought the fact that the show included many photos of models filleting, quote, Uncle Terry. Among those models was his intern at the time, New York University student Alex, who was pictured doing the deed from inside a trash can while the word slut was pasted across her forehead. Terry World is a collection of works by the infamous photographer and is definitely a page-turner. One of Richardson's famous quotes, and he's quoted it multiple times, is, "Like I've always said, it's not who you know in this industry, it's who you blow. I don't have a hole in my jeans for nothing." The magazine Jezebel received an email from a writer and stylist from New York named Anna and published the entire letter describing her alleged encounter with Richardson. The photo shoot started off with Anna standing against a wall making faces. Anna said it escalated after posing on the floor. She said, "I felt a penis pressing into the side of my face. Terry Richardson's semi-hard penis was plunged into the outside of my cheek and he was jabbing it into my face." So I'll end with that for now. I mean, Terry Richardson, you could make a whole video about him alone and some of his hijinks and shenanigans and incredibly disturbing behavior. But just another example of the kind of filth that works out there in that industry. So I wanted to cover just a few other aspects of the creepiness happening out there in Hollywood outside of these most recent scandals. And it's my hope that these scandals will continue to break open and ultimately destroy that whole system. I would love to see Hollywood be destroyed as it is. I can only imagine with everything coming out right now that there's tons more to go. You know, there's got to be a lot of other victims out there that have their stories. And it's my prayer that the people out there, the victims, will have the strength and the protection to come forward and start pointing fingers at these disgusting people in that satanic system who've been abusing others for years. Speaking of which, if you haven't seen the documentary An Open Secret yet, I highly suggest it. Please look this up, An Open Secret. It's a wonderful expose on abuse in Hollywood. And I'll leave you with that. Once again, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. I really appreciate you out there. Take care of yourselves, all right? And I'll talk to you a little later.